And now I'll share the screen. Okay, so I have selected, and I've taught these texts in various places. I'm some of them I know I've taught at Kehilat Shalom before in one place or another, but not necessarily all of them. But these are texts that I feel, I mean, it's not like there's a collection of Talmud texts that reflect about leadership, but these are texts that I feel have something to say about what it means to be a leader in a Jewish context. Okay, so this is from Sahim, and it's the section that, I mean, in theory, deals with the Pesach. As you'll see, this has nothing to do with Pesach or the Seder. So the discussion that they're having is what happens if you're having, let's say, a late lunch on Friday afternoon. Okay, a late lunch on Friday afternoon, probably in the winter, and you're eating lunch and you look outside and it's gotten dark. Okay, so now it's Shabbos, right? So what do you do? And like one key question is, I mean, as you know, there's a different Birkat Hamazon for weekdays versus Shabbat, right? So do you say the weekday Birkat Hamazon because you ate the meal on a weekday? Or do you say the Shabbat Birkat Hamazon because you're eating on Shabbat? Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda says that if this happens, we stop eating, we spread a tablecloth, okay, and that was sort of like the way that they marked that this was a different meal, right? You spread a tablecloth. So Yehuda says you stop eating, you spread a tablecloth, you say the Kiddush over wine to inaugurate Shabbat, and then you say Birkat Hamazon for Shabbat. Rabbi Yosef says, nah, you don't have to do that. Okay, finish eating, finish your meal, say the weekday Birkat Hamazon, and then you spread the tablecloth and say Kiddush. Okay, so just before we dive into the text, and I can't see everybody because it's doing the share screen. So if you have a question or a comment, just sort of hop in, don't raise your hand. Any questions or comments on my sort of preamble to the text that we're going to see? Okay. I have to say, I find this odd. I mean, it's hard for me to imagine, as we're going to see in the text itself, three rabbis having lunch late on a Friday afternoon, and all of a sudden they notice that it's become Shabbat. To me, that's just bizarre. I mean, but that's what the text says. Okay. So we learn in a Baraita, we stop for Shabbat according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yosef says we do not stop. That's what I just explained. Okay, so now it happened once that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yosef were dining in Akko when the day became sanctified on them, i.e., they noticed that it turned Shabbat. Now, this is very convenient. So first question, what's the difference between Rabban and Rabbi or Rabbi? Anybody know? Okay, so Rabban is the title for the head of the Sanhedrin. Okay, so and conveniently, we have Shimon ben Gamliel, who's the head of the Sanhedrin or the head of the yeshiva, and Yehuda and Yosei, who are our two protagonists in this Baraita. And conveniently, they happen to be eating lunch together, late lunch on Friday in Akko, and they notice that it's become Shabbat. I'm not sure if Akko is significant or not. It could be because Akko is considered outside the borders of Eretz Yisrael, according to the Talmud, because that was actually Philistine or Phoenician country. But I'm not sure that that has relevance. Okay, so Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said to Rabbi Yosei, Rabbi, with your permission, may we stop? Out of deference to the opinion of our colleague Yehuda. Okay, now why would Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel do that? Right, he's got it right. It's binary. You're either going to follow the opinion of Rabbi Yosei or follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Right, there's no possibility of a compromise. It would be like, we had an argument about the B page, and so I suggested, well, we won't say Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. We'll just say Sarah and Rebecca, but we'll leave out Rachel and Leah. Okay, that compromise would satisfy nobody, right? Why would he suggest to Rabbi Yosei that they agree to follow the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Anyone just take a guess?
He agrees
All right,
with them.
so, well, not necessarily.
Well, okay.
Not necessarily. I mean, he might, but all right. So here, let me repeat this in more accessible terms. Okay, three of us are going out. Okay, and I'm going out with you, Joe, and Wendy. Okay, and Joe, you accept the ruling that the law committee came out last spring that says it's okay to eat in a vegetarian restaurant that doesn't have a hechsher. Okay, and Wendy says, no, I only eat in restaurants that have a hechsher. Okay, and I say, Joe, do you mind if we go to Al Ha'esh instead of Yuan Fu out of deference to Wendy's opinion?
Oh,
Why would I say that?
because he's taking the most restrictive stance or point of view, so so that nobody would be, I don't know how to say it, but you understand what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. Right. If you have a more stringent and a less stringent opinion, right? I mean, I can eat at a kosher restaurant, I can eat in a vegetarian restaurant, right? But a person who says only a kosher restaurant can't eat, right? So you follow the more stringent opinion, right? So that everybody is satisfied, right? And so Yehuda's opinion is a more stringent one. So you follow that so that everybody can, be comfortable. Okay. And Rabbi Yosei says, hold on a second. Every day in the Beit Midrash, you prefer my opinion to that of Rabbi Yehuda. And now you prefer Rabbi Yehuda's opinion over mine. And then he quotes from the Megillah, from Esther. Will he have his way with the queen in my own house? In other words, why is Yosei upset?
Well, in
He
the
says, go ahead.
are they
Yeah.
usually I'm assuming that what they're talking about is not occurring. It's in the future, but this is happening right now. So it makes a
Right.
difference.
Right. There's a difference between a theoretical discussion, right? We're in the Beit Midrash, we're in the yeshiva, and we're having a theoretical discussion. And we're having a theoretical discussion. And I mean, it helps to know that Yosei and Yehuda were sort of known sparring partners, right? If you'll find a debate, it's always Yosei on one side, Yehuda on the other side, right? And so Rabban Gamliel generally took the opinion of Rabbi Yosei when it was theoretical, right? But now the rubber's hitting the road. The rubber's hitting the road, and you want to prefer Rabbi Yehuda's opinion over mine. Okay, so I don't like this. Okay, so he, that is Rabban Gamliel, said to him, if that is the case, we will not stop lest the students see and establish a law for all generations. It was said that they did not move from there until they established the law according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Okay, now this is the key paragraph, right? Because this may give us some insight into why Rabbi Yossi was upset, right? I mean, what does this paragraph, this last paragraph, tell us about what was Rabbi Yossi's concern here? Right? What is lest the students see and establish a law for all generations? What does that have to do with anything?
It just seems as though the Rabban Gamliel just really feels that if students would, people who are under their care in terms of and teaching, that they need to, if they see them doing this one thing, that they keep going, then the students could say, oh, then that if these illustrious rabbis do this, then we should follow suit, and that's what we will do from here on out.
Right. In other words, right, exactly, right? Like in other words, so lest the students see, right? I mean, the operative verb here is see. In other words, the students will see what the senior rabbis did, and they won't know because they weren't privy to the discussion. Right? So they won't know that Rabbi Yosei agreed to follow Rabbi Yehuda's opinion out of courtesy, let's say, but not because he agreed with it, right? But the students will see what happened, and they will establish the law for all generations, but they will establish it incorrectly, right? They will establish it incorrectly based on what they saw without being privy to all the details, right? Now, I mean, this is key in a lot of ways, right? I mean, we jump to a conclusion, right, about something that we've seen, right, without knowing all the details, without knowing the context, without knowing the background, right? I mean, like sometimes I'll say, you walk into a room and you see a guy tied down on a table, and there's a bunch of people standing around him, and one guy has a knife and he's about to cut into the guy on the table, right? What are you going to do? And they say, oh, we have to save the guy on the table. I say, Mazel tov. You just interfered with a heart transplant, right? You got to know the context, right? But I mean, this text, for example, guided me when my mom passed away, and I had to communicate to the congregation what I was doing and why, because my mom was very, very insistent. She didn't want any funeral. She didn't want me to sit Shiva, right? She was very insistent. So I didn't sit Shiva, right? But I made sure that I explained that in an email to the congregation, because I didn't want people to say, well, the rabbi didn't sit Shiva for his mother, so obviously I don't have to sit Shiva for one of my parents, right? Because people decide what's acceptable very often based on what they see, right? And they, and this goes back to the Talmud, right? I mean, we have countless stories, right? Ma'aseh beh, it happened that, and people determine the halacha based on what they observe, right? And so, so not to throw this open, what does this say about leadership, right? What does this say about leadership?
You lead by example.
Right, you lead by example, right? I mean, that's one thing, right? People, right, like, the sort of sarcastic phrase, do as I say, not as I do, right? But no, people are going to do as I do, right? So I have to be really, really careful about being seen to do it properly, because people will conclude what is proper based on their observation of what I do, right? It also says that, to me, like, and many of you may have had this experience where you contacted me with a halachic question, right? And I said, you know what? I'm not 100% sure, right? Let me do some research and I'll get back to you, right? Why? People sometimes are impatient. I don't want to wait. I want an answer now, right? But why would I say no, no, no? Look, I have to do research and I'll get back to you. Why? Why not just, whatever I think at the moment?
Because that could come back to haunt you in future times.
It could, right? It could, because, people will say, well, I mean, people do that all the time, right? You said to Mr. A X, and you're saying to Mr. B something else. How come, right? But, if you are a rabbi, you are the guardian of the tradition. You're the guardian of the Masorah, and therefore you're obligated to get it right. You're obligated to get it right, right? Because I mean, the way the system works, right? If I give you bad information and you act on that, who's the sinner? Not you, me, right? Because I gave you came to me for halachic information and I gave you bad information, right? So it's really important. I mean, that's part of it too, the obligation to really get it right, right? But I think, to me, the key here is that particularly when people are going to understand what is proper behavior based on their observation of you, you have to be really, really careful. You have to be really, really careful. You have to set the proper example. Now, any questions or comments?
Doesn't it also show that a decision backed up by research and facts and evidence will have more validity and credibility over time, right? You go.
Yeah,
yeah.
Right. But I mean, the fear is precisely the opposite, right? That the students will have observed and not understand the background behind it, right? And that's, look, that's very common, right? When, so if you are doing something that could be misinterpreted, then you have to explain the reasoning and the rationale behind it. Okay, so move on to the next text. I think this is a fun text myself. Okay, so the question is, can you slaughter the Paschal sacrifice, the Korban Pesach, on Shabbat? Right? In other words, does it override Shabbat or not? Right? If the first day of Pesach falls on Shabbat, or actually Erev Pesach, because the Korban Pesach is slaughtered Erev Pesach, so Erev Pesach falls on Shabbat. Do you go ahead and slaughter the Korban Pesach or not? Now, it's not just a question of slaughtering the Korban Pesach. I mean, slaughtering is not allowed on Shabbat, but what else is involved in the Korban Pesach is roasting it, right? So you got to light a fire, you got to put it on the fire. It's cooking. It's lighting a fire. All of these things are not allowed on Shabbat, right? So the question of the Korban Pesach overriding Shabbat matters, right? And Pesach doesn't coincide with Shabbat every year. So, and of course, back then they were still determining the calendar by visual observation, right? So if they said, well, if we accept this testimony, then Pesach is going to fall on Shabbat. So we'll disqualify these witnesses so it'll fall on Sunday instead, and we won't have to worry about it. That could well have happened too. All right. So that's the question, and they don't know the answer. Okay. So our rabbis taught this law was forgotten by the sons of Batira. One day, the 14th of Nisan, that's Erev Pesach, the day when the Korban Pesach is slaughtered and offered. The 14th of Nisan fell on Shabbat, and they forgot and did not know if the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not. So they asked, is there anyone who knows if the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not? Okay, now this language is very repetitive, but I translated it that way on purpose because the Hebrew in the Gemara is repetitive. Okay, they were told there is someone who came up from Babylonia named Hillel, who was a disciple of the two great sages Shemaiah and Avtalion, and he knows if the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not. They called him and asked him, do you know if the Paschal lamb overrides Shabbat or not? Okay, so everybody's saying, right, well, we don't know, but we know who would know. Okay, there's this guy named Hillel who came up from Babylonia, and he would know. All right, now why is it relevant to mention that this guy came up from Babylonia.
Was that like a day's ride? Like, so he would know the time, before they did?
No,
would-
it's way more than a day.
Oh.
Way more than a day. I mean, Babylon, that's like Iraq. Okay, so that's far. I mean, you've got Iraq and Syria, and it's far. The point is, he's an immigrant. Okay, he's an immigrant. And the native Jews of Eretz Yisrael look down on immigrants. Okay, there is nothing new under the sun, right? There is nothing new under the sun, right? He's an immigrant. They look down on immigrants. Okay, so it's relevant. It means he's a low class person. Okay, so they ask him, does the Paschal Lamb override Shabbat or not? And he said to them, do we only have one Paschal Lamb a year which overrides Shabbat? Don't we have more than 200 Paschal Lambs a year which override Shabbat? They asked him what he meant. He said, Scripture says at its proper time, b'moado, for the Paschal Lamb, and it says at its proper time, b'moado, for the daily sacrifice. Okay, so this is a rabbinic methodology of knowing if two things are similar, is if the Torah uses the same language. Okay, so it says b'moado for the Pesach sacrifice, and it says b'moado for the daily sacrifice. And just as at its proper time overrides Shabbat for the daily sacrifice, because that's offered even on Shabbat, so in its proper time overrides Shabbat in the case of the Paschal Lamb, right? I mean, in other words, everybody knows. Everybody knows that we do the daily sacrifice, and there are 4 of them. We do that even on Shabbat. Everybody knows that, right? And if we do the daily sacrifice on Shabbat, because it says b'moado at its proper time, then we do the Paschal sacrifice on Shabbat as well, because it's the same language, okay? And furthermore, it is an argument alpha fortiori, in other words, stronger, right? The daily sacrifice, which is not punished by excision is correct. It says, that soul will be cut off, right? And if you miss the daily sacrifice, it's not the punishment of karet. It's not your soul will be cut off. But if you miss the Paschal Lamb, it does say, if you miss the Korban Pesach, your soul will be cut off from your people, right? So that is a more serious thing, right? So we have 2 reasons why the Korban Pesach does in fact override Shabbat, okay? Now, this is not like relevant to the question of leadership. I just want to make sure you understand like the setup here, okay? So they were very impressed, and they immediately sat him down at a place of honor and appointed him the head of the academy. Okay, and actually Rabban Gamliel was like his grandson, I think, so it became hereditary, but this is how the family of Hillel became in charge of the academy. So like they were so impressed, right? This poor immigrant, low-class person is very wise. They made him the head of the academy. He began to teach all day long about the laws of Pesach. Then he started to berate them. What was it that made it necessary for me to come up from Babylonia and be the head of your academy? Your own laziness, in that you did not serve as disciples of the 2 great sages, Shemaiah and Avtalio, right? He's saying, you pitiful right? You pitiful Eretz Yisrael born Jews, right? You didn't learn hard enough, and therefore you had to go find this immigrant, maybe illegal immigrant, I don't know. You had to find this immigrant to be the head of your academy because you didn't study hard enough, right? Now, again, there is nothing new under the sun, right? I mean, right? The Jews excelled in the last century because we were immigrants and we worked hard, right? Now the Asians are the new Jews, right? I mean, there is literally nothing new under the sun, right? But what do you think? What do you think about what Hillel has started to do? Right? It's not nice, right? It's not nice. He's, become like puffed up, right? They asked him, Rabbi, if someone forgot to bring a knife for the sacrifice before Shabbat, what is the law? Okay. Now, why is this question necessary? Right? I mean, we have an analogous situation today, right? I mean, if a boy is born on Shabbat and is generally healthy, right? The bris is the next Shabbat, right? And the bris overrides Shabbat. You do the bris even though it's Shabbat. Why? For a similar reason, right? Because the Torah says on the 8th day, right? On the 8th day, and a specific obligation overrides a general prohibition, right? So the bris override. Has anybody, any of you have a kid who had a bris on Shabbos? Okay. If there's a bris on Shabbos, the bris overrides Shabbos. Bringing the bris kit does not override Shabbos, right? In other words, the moil bringing his equipment doesn't override Shabbos, right?
Yes.
To mention the catering doesn't override Shabbos, right? So even though the bris itself can take place on Shabbos, the moil, since assuming that the moil is observant, which they mostly are, right? They have to bring their equipment to the place where the bris is going to be taking place before Shabbos, right? Because that, right, the bris itself overrides, but not everything else surrounding it, okay? So if someone forgot to bring a knife before Shabbat, what is the law? He said, I learned the law, but I have forgotten it, okay? Now, I learned this law, but I have forgotten it. Why did he forget it? I think he's being punished for his arrogance, right? He got arrogant. He started berating the people. So God took away his knowledge, right? God took away his knowledge, I think. All right. But leave it to Israel. If they are not prophets, they are the sons of prophets. The next day, anyone whose paschal offering was a sheep stuck the knife in its wool. And anyone whose paschal offering was a goat tied the knife between its horns. Okay, what does that accomplish?
Nobody's carrying it.
Well, it's being carried.
Yeah, but the
Right.
goat or the sheep, they don't.
Right, it's being carried by the goat or the sheep, right? And they don't have to keep Shabbos.
Right.
Right. So they're allowed. right? They're allowed. So that's exactly right. Okay, right. So he said, and then he said he saw their actions, and he said, "This is what I learned from Shemaiah and Talia." Okay, I just want to note that I don't know whether it's Rashi or Tosafot, because I read it a long time ago, and I don't want to go down this road because it's a interesting but not relevant to our topic. This is the Paschal Lamb, right? The Paschal Lamb is carrying the method of its execution to the place of the slaughter, right? For Christians, Jesus is the Paschal Lamb who also carried the method of his own execution, right? Carried the cross to the place of the slaughter. Okay, now, is Rashi explaining this because he says, well, everything the Christians have, we have too? Or did the Christians get it from this? I mean, either one is possible. It's not relevant, but I just thought I would mention it. Okay, but now back to the question that I asked about the previous text, right? What does this say about being a leader? What does this say about leadership? What are the leadership lessons of this text? I mean, I think there are a lot. All right. What was the problem with Hillel's attitude towards the people he was now leading?
Or he berated them.
He berated, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he had contempt for them, really. Right? You were lazy, right? You don't know this because you were too lazy to learn, right? So he had contempt for the people that he was leading, right? If you have contempt for the people that you are leading, very difficult to be an effective leader, right? And he was not an effective leader because he lost his learning, right? He lost his learning, and then as a result of that, he changed his attitude towards the people, right? He said, I don't know, but the people will know, right? Leave it to Israel. If they're not prophets, they're the sons of prophets, right? And they will know what to do, right? So, his attitude changed and he became a more effective leader, right? But I think this is an important lesson. I think in Jewish life, it's very problematic. In Jewish life, we sometimes do, not sometimes, often, I think, have leaders who look down on the people that they're supposed to lead, right? Whether that's rabbis, whether that's lay leaders, whoever it is. But if you look down on the people that you're leading, you will not be an effective leader, right? You have to give the people credit. I mean, to me, that is like a key lesson that sort of leaps out from this text. Any other thoughts on this text? Okay,
Well,
so we'll
sometimes
go
you
on
need.
to
Well, sometimes
what?
sometimes you need to turn to an outsider. They did, turn to this non-Israelite to help, to help them out of this dilemma they were in.
Right, that's true, right? Sometimes you do have
Yeah.
to, turn to an outsider, right?
Right.
So you hire a consultant,
Right.
right? Okay, great. All right, so this is from Tractate Rosh Hashanah. To me, this is a less fun text, actually. Very much a not fun text, right? So the question is, how do we, right? So at this time, Rosh Chodesh is determined by actual visual observation, right? They did not have a fixed calendar, right? I briefly forgot that tonight started Rosh Chodesh, but I remembered it. How do I know that tonight is Rosh Chodesh, right? Because there's 10 million different websites that tell you, right? I have a luach, I got an email from HeadCal, right? We know it's Rosh Chodesh, right? Because there's a fixed calendar, right? But at this time, there was not a fixed calendar. The fixed calendar came into effect only after the temple was destroyed and we went into exile. Okay, prior to that, there was visual observation. So if you saw the new moon, you came to Jerusalem, you went to the Sanhedrin, which met on the Temple Mount, and you said, I saw the new moon, or we saw the new moon. And by the way, in Islam, this is the way it's still done. Okay? And sometimes, because different parts of the world, certain holidays might fall a day apart, depending on the witnesses and when they saw it. Okay? So if people came and they testified that they saw the new moon and their testimony was accepted, the beginning of the new month was proclaimed. Okay, but if not, then it wasn't accepted, and Rosh Chodesh would be, instead of that day, it would be the next day, right? So that there could be a 1 day difference for a particular holiday, right? So another time, 2 witnesses came and said, we saw the new moon at its appropriate time, but on the next night it was not seen, right? So they see the new moon, right? And the new moon is just right? There's no moon and then there's a sliver, right? So you see that sliver, and then you should see a little bit more sliver the next day, right? But it wasn't seen. Rabban Gamliel nevertheless accepted their testimony. Okay? Rabbi Dosa ben Horkino said they are false witnesses. How do they testify about a woman that she has given birth and the next day her belly is between her teeth? Right? Meaning, right, they say that this woman gave birth, but the next day she's still visibly pregnant, right? They're false witnesses. Okay, Rabbi Joshua said, I agree with you. Okay, so what does that mean? If their testimony is false, then the new month has not properly begun, right? Meaning Rabban Gamliel made a mistake. And Yom Kippur is actually a day later than the day proclaimed by the Sanhedrin, right? So that's what Rabbi Joshua says, right? These are false witnesses. Their testimony is not valid, right? Rabban Gamliel sent him a message. I order you to appear before me with your walking stick and your purse on the day which is Yom Kippur according to your calculation. Right? So what's the significance of what Rabban Gamliel has ordered Rabbi Joshua to do? Right? In other words, I think the whole Jewish world is celebrating Yom Kippur on, let's say, September 15th, right? But you think it's actually September 16th, right? I order you on September 16th to come to my office with your walking stick and your purse, right? What is the significance of that?
Well, you're not, I would assume, I think you're not supposed to carry a purse or money on Yom Kippur, right?
Correct. You're not allowed, right? You're not allowed to carry money. You're not allowed to carry your walking stick, right? So he's essentially saying, right, I order you to violate Yom Kippur. The day that you think is Yom Kippur, I am ordering you to treat it as a weekday, not as Yom Kippur, right? That's what he's ordering him to do, right? What do you think about that?
Is
Right?
that
I mean,
because he's
go ahead.
very sure that Rabbi Joshua is wrong?
Yes, but so what? I mean, Rabbi Gamliel in our first text, right, was willing to act according to the more stringent opinion, right? If Rabbi Joshua wants to treat that day as Yom Kippur, no skin off my nose, right? Why am I being so harsh? Why am I ordering him to do this thing, which we know is gonna bother him tremendously? Okay? I mean, all right, let's go on. All right, Rabbi Akiva found him, Rabbi Joshua, troubled and said, I can prove to you that everything which Rabbi Gamliel has done is validly done as it is written, right? Leviticus 23, these are the festivals of the Lord which you shall proclaim, right? El Moadei Adonai Mikra'e Kodesh Asher Tikra'u Otam, right? Which you shall proclaim. Whether at the right time or not, I have no festivals but these. In other words, right, the way Rabbi Akiva is reading that text, right, it says, which you shall proclaim, right? So the holidays come when the Sanhedrin declares that the holidays come, right? And if the Sanhedrin is wrong, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. The holidays are still when the Sanhedrin declares, even if the Sanhedrin is wrong, right? Whether at the right time or not, I have no festivals but these. Okay, then Rabbi Joshua went to Rabbi Dosa ben Horkinos, right? Who's the guy who started this whole thing, right? Because Rabbi Joshua just agreed with Rabbi Dosa. Right? Rabbi Dosa is the one who started the whole thing, right? But Rabbi Dosa ben Horkinos said to him, if we are going to investigate the actions of Rabban Gamliel's court, we will have to examine the actions of every court which has existed from the time of Moses until now. All right, I could skip the next couple of sentences. They more confusing than helpful if you don't know the context. Teach you that every group of three which has arisen as a court over Israel is equivalent to the court of Moses, right? So this is the rabbinic equivalent of, I don't know how you pronounce it, stare decisis, right? The rabbinic equivalent of stare decisis, right? Rabbi Gamliel made the decision. It's been decided. He could have been right, he could have been wrong, but the decision is made. And if we start re-examining the decisions of Rabbi Gamliel, then we have to go back every court over Israel that has ever existed, right? Going all the way back to Moses, because every group of three which has arisen as a court over Israel, right? In other words, every Beit Din is three rabbis, is equivalent to the court of Moses, right? And this is a basic foundational principle of the halachic system, right? God gave the Torah to Moses, Moses gave it to Joshua, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, down the line, right? And therefore, the rabbis of every generation have the exact same authority as Moses, right? You can buy it, you cannot buy it, but that is a basic sort of foundational principle of the way halacha works, right? So now Rabbi Joshua is a more prominent rabbi than Rabbi Dosa ben Horkino, so that's probably why he made Rabbi Joshua the example and not Rabbi Dosa. But Rabbi Dosa actually, seems much more amenable to going along with Rabbi Gamliel than Rabbi Joshua was. Okay, and there's lots of tension between Rabbi Joshua and Rabbi Gamliel, and eventually Rabbi Gamliel is going to excommunicate Rabbi Joshua. Okay, but that hasn't happened yet. That's the oven of Achnai, and that happens in that story, right? But let me ask this, what is Rabbi Gamliel's concern, right? Why is he being, frankly, so nasty to Rabbi Joshua, right? Why? What's his concern? Is he just concerned about his own authority? Or is he concerned about something bigger than that?
I mean, the holidays are supposed to be celebrated by Jews, and it's laid out. And if everybody went his own way, that would undercut the significance of any particular day, and it would do more harm than good.
Right. I mean, you're familiar. There's a phrase, right? Everybody makes Shabbos for himself, right? And which is not a good state of affairs, right? We're supposed to have unity, right? We're supposed to have unity. And the one thing, I mean, it's interesting, right? I mean, if you look at all the various streams or movements or sects of Judaism, we don't have the same Siddur anymore, right? We don't have the same kashrus anymore, right? We don't, but what do we all still have? Right? We still all have the same calendar, right? That is the one thing maybe that actually holds us together, right? We all either observe or don't observe the holidays on the same day. We all have the same calendar, right? And so Rabbi Gamliel is concerned about division in the society, right? So, if Rabbi Joshua hadn't said anything, right? If Rabbi Joshua hadn't said anything, and he said, you know what? I'm going to observe the day after Yom Kippur as Yom Kippur too, right? I think that would have been fine, right? But the point is that he sort of proclaimed it publicly, right? And you can't do that. Okay, so now Rabbi Joshua has gone to two other rabbis, and they've convinced him to follow the ruling of Rabbi Gamliel. So he took his walking stick and purse in his hands and went to Rabbi Gamliel in Yavna on the day which was Yom Kippur according to his calculation. Rabbi Gamliel stood and kissed him on the head and said to him, "Come in peace, my master and my disciple. My master in wisdom and my disciple, because you heeded my words." Okay, so what has Rabban Gamliel done now, and why? Right? Or what do you think about the way Rabban Gamliel has handled this?
I mean, he was happy because he got his way. He held the calendar. He held the people to the calendar as he saw it, and the aberrant guy gave in. But I mean, the fact is, Israel and the diaspora have different calendars. I mean, it's
Well,
no
but we don't
longer
have.
what we have in common.
No, we don't have different calendars. I mean, yeah, we've got a second day of Yontif that they don't have,
Right, and we have
right?
Simchas Torah, and they don't.
All right, but the first day of Rosh Hashanah is the same everywhere.
True,
The first day of Pesach is the same everywhere.
but
Yom Kippur is the
last day
same.
is not.
Right, right. That's not significant. I mean, but Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, Renewal, Reconstructionist, Humanist. If I missed any denominations, throw them in. We all have the same calendar, right? All right, with the exception, the Reform don't have second day Yontif, and even some conservative shuls don't have second day Yontif, but basically it's the same calendar, right? But so Rabban Gamliel is happy because he's preserved that unity, right? But now, having preserved that unity, what does he do? Right? He's conciliatory, right? He's conciliatory. And he says, I mean, whether he means it or not, I don't know, but my master in wisdom, right? So if Rabbi Joshua is his master in wisdom, Rabban Gamliel is simply the office holder, right? He's not right. No, by the way, nobody here is saying that Rabban Gamliel is objectively correct, right? Nobody is saying that. They're saying that Rabban Gamliel is the one who has the authority to make the decision, right? And since he is the holder of the authority, it's his decision to make, it's valid. Nobody's saying that he's objectively correct, right? Maybe not even Rabban Gamliel at this point, because he's saying, Rabbi Joshua, my master in wisdom, right? But nevertheless, my disciple, because you heeded my words, right? So now, I mean, it's interesting if I think about this in terms of like leadership, right? He's done two opposite things, really, right? He's been like really harsh and dictatorial, right? But having been harsh and dictatorial and won the point, now he's conciliatory, right? And, I guess sometimes you have to be one and sometimes you have to be the other, right? And the wisdom comes in sort of like knowing when to be which, right? When do you have to be like really, harsh and dictatorial, and when do you have to be conciliatory, right? It's not, I mean, there's no like obvious guideposts for this. All right. Questions come? Yeah, Sue.
I have just a question. What was the approximate date of those documents?
All right. Well, they're in the Babylonian Talmud, okay, which means they were codified the 5th, 6th century of the Common Era, but they preserve oral traditions that go back much further, right? I mean, Hillel is roughly contemporaneous with Jesus, Okay, Rabban Gamliel is 2 generations after that. Okay, so still like prior to the codification of the Mishnah. So let's say sometime between year 1 of the Common Era and year 200 of the Common Era. Okay, I mean, I don't know like more exact. If I like had a PhD in Talmud, I would know more exact, but that's close enough for, close enough.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. Anybody else? Thanks for joining.
Yasher Koach.
Brachim to you. Good night. Shabbat
Thank you.
shalom.
Yashikoa,
Good
bye.
night.
See
Shabbat.
ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.